Top 5 Ouija board horror encounters that opened a door to hell. In the quiet corners of suburban homes, where families gather around kitchen tables and teenagers seek thrills during sleepover parties, there exists a wooden board with letters and numbers that serves as a direct telephone line to realms where ancient evils wait with infinite patience for naive humans to make contact. The Ouija board isn't a harmless parlor game or amusing party trick. It is a gateway device that has been documented in thousands of cases where ordinary people accidentally tore holes in reality itself, allowing entities from dimensions of pure malevolence to enter our world and establish permanent residence in human lives. These demonic forces don't simply haunt houses or create poltergeist disturbances. They systematically destroy families, drive individuals to madness and violence, and create supernatural infections that spread through bloodlines and communities like spiritual cancer that feeds on human suffering. What makes these cases particularly terrifying isn't just the supernatural phenomena witnesses experienced. It's the documented evidence that once these portals are opened, they can never truly be closed. The demons that enter our reality through Ouija board sessions establish permanent footholds that continue affecting families for generations. These 5 documented cases represent the most horrifying examples of what happens when humans use Ouija boards to contact the spirit world and discover that some doors should never be opened because closing them becomes impossible. If you love what we do here, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. It helps us summon more stories from the shadows every single night. Number 5. The Patience Worth Phenomenon. St. Louis housewife Pearl Lenore Curran lived an unremarkable life until the evening of July 8, 1913, when she and her neighbor Emily Hutchings decided to experiment with a Ouija board that Emily had purchased as entertainment for their weekly social gathering. Pearl had no interest in spiritualism or supernatural phenomena, but curiosity compelled her to place her fingers on the planchette alongside Emily's hands. The board immediately began moving with violent force that neither woman could control. Letters spelled out a message that chilled them both to the bone. Many moons ago I lived, again I come. Patience Worth my name. When Pearl asked who Patience Worth was, the board responded with information about a woman who had lived in 17th century England before immigrating to colonial America, where she claimed to have been murdered by Native American raiders. What began as parlor entertainment transformed into a possession that consumed Pearl's entire existence. Patience Worth demanded daily communication sessions that lasted for hours, during which Pearl would enter trance states and speak in archaic English dialects she had never studied. The entity claimed Pearl's body as its vessel for returning to the world of the living, using her vocal cords and motor functions to dictate thousands of pages of poetry, literature, and historical information. Patience Worth's literary output through Pearl exceeded anything the St. Louis housewife could have produced independently. The entity dictated several full-length novels set in historical periods with detailed accuracy about customs, language patterns, and cultural practices that Pearl had never studied. Literature experts who examined Patience's work confirmed that the writing demonstrated knowledge of Middle English, Biblical Hebrew, and Victorian literary techniques that exceeded Pearl's 8th grade education. The possession intensified over time as Patience Worth gained increasing control over Pearl's consciousness during waking hours. Pearl began speaking in Patience's voice during normal conversations, losing hours of memory to blackouts where the entity controlled her body for unknown activities. Family members reported that Pearl's personality changed dramatically, showing knowledge of historical events and speaking with authority about subjects she had never studied. Medical examination by Dr. Walter Franklin Prince revealed that Pearl's physical condition deteriorated as the possession strengthened. She experienced weight loss, chronic fatigue, and neurological symptoms that suggested her brain was being altered by supernatural forces. EEG readings during communication sessions showed brainwave patterns that didn't match normal human consciousness, indicating that another intelligence was accessing her neural pathways. The entity revealed increasingly disturbing information about its true nature and intentions. Patience Worth claimed to be one of thousands of spirits trapped between dimensions, who used Ouija boards as escape routes into the world of the living. Each successful possession allowed them to establish permanent connections that could never be severed, transforming human hosts into spiritual anchors for entities seeking physical resurrection. Pearl's family life disintegrated as the possession consumed more of her time and energy. Her husband reported that Pearl became obsessed with the communication sessions, spending entire days in trance states while patients dictated material that filled over 30 published volumes. The entity demanded specific foods, clothing styles, and living conditions that reflected 17th century preferences rather than 20th century American lifestyle. Attempts to end the communication sessions resulted in violent poltergeist phenomena throughout Pearl's house. Furniture moved without explanation, temperatures dropped to freezing levels, and family members experienced psychological attacks that included nightmares, depression, and suicidal ideation. Patience Worth demonstrated that it possessed power extending beyond Pearl's body into the physical environment where the family lived. The case attracted national attention from psychical researchers who documented the possession over a period of 25 years. Scientists observed supernatural phenomena that violated natural law, including levitation of objects, materialization of historical artifacts, and temperature fluctuations that created ice formations in summer weather. Patience Worth's manifestations proved that the entity possessed capabilities exceeding normal spiritual communication. Pearl died in 1937 after decades of serving as Patience Worth's physical vessel. However, the entity's influence didn't terminate with Pearl's death. Family members continued experiencing supernatural phenomena in houses where Pearl had lived, and subsequent owners reported ongoing manifestations including disembodied voices, moving objects, and psychological influences that matched Patience Worth's documented characteristics. The case established precedent for understanding Ouija board possession as permanent spiritual infection rather than temporary communication with deceased individuals. Patience Worth proved that entities contacted through spirit boards could establish lasting control over human consciousness while maintaining supernatural abilities that affected both host and environment. And in St. Louis, something still writes using hands that no longer belong to the living. Number 4. The London Amy Haunting. The Morrison family moved into their Victorian terrace house in Enfield, North London in March 1977, attracted by reasonable rent and proximity to good schools for their 3 children. Single mother Margaret Morrison appreciated the house's period charm and spacious rooms that provided adequate living space for her growing family. Unaware that previous tenants had abandoned the property due to supernatural activity that estate agents preferred not to discuss. The supernatural activity began 3 weeks after the Morrison family settled into their new home. Margaret's 11-year-old daughter Janet reported hearing a young girl's voice calling for help during nighttime hours when everyone else was sleeping. The voice seemed to come from the walls themselves, echoing through the house with desperate pleas that Amy wants to come home, and Amy needs her mummy. Margaret initially dismissed Janet's reports as imagination combined with adjustment stress from moving to a new neighborhood. However, other family members began experiencing unusual phenomena, including footsteps in empty rooms, doors opening and closing without explanation, and children's toys moving independently around the house. The supernatural activity centered around Janet's bedroom, where the voice of Amy became increasingly frequent and demanding. Investigation revealed that the house's previous tenant, elderly widow Mrs. Sarah Blackwood, had used Ouija boards extensively during her 40-year residence. Neighbors reported that Mrs. Blackwood held weekly seances in her parlor, claiming to communicate with spirits of deceased children who had lived in the house during Victorian times. Among these spiritual contacts was a young girl named Amy, who had allegedly died of tuberculosis in the house during the 1890s. Mrs. Blackwood's death in February 1977 had occurred during a Ouija board session, where she was attempting to contact Amy's spirit. The elderly woman was found seated at her parlor table with the board still beneath her hands, having apparently suffered a heart attack during supernatural communication. The Ouija board remained in the house when the Morrison family moved in, stored in the basement among items left by the previous tenant. Janet Morrison discovered the Ouija board while exploring the basement and convinced her brothers to experiment with the device during an evening when their mother was working late. The children's seance session made contact with Amy's spirit, who claimed to have been trapped in the house since Mrs. Blackwood's death and desperately wanted to resume communication with the living world. Amy's manifestations escalated rapidly following the children's Ouija session. The entity demonstrated poltergeist abilities that included moving furniture, manipulating electrical systems, and creating physical phenomena that challenged natural law. Temperature fluctuations caused ice to form in specific rooms while other areas remained warm, and water appeared on walls and ceilings despite no plumbing problems that could explain the moisture. The spirit began possessing Janet Morrison during sleep, causing the 11-year-old to speak in an adult woman's voice with Victorian-era vocabulary and mannerisms that exceeded her education and cultural knowledge. During these possession episodes, Janet demonstrated knowledge of historical events and social customs from the 1890s, speaking with authority about life in Victorian London that she could not have acquired through normal learning. Amy's communications revealed increasingly disturbing information about her death and continued existence. The entity claimed to have died not from tuberculosis, but from deliberate poisoning by her parents, who had become exhausted by caring for their chronically ill daughter. Amy's spirit harbored rage about her murder and sought revenge against living families who occupied her house, particularly targeting children who reminded her of the life she had been denied. The possession episodes became violent as Amy gained increasing control over Janet's body. The child exhibited superhuman strength during supernatural seizures, speaking in multiple voices that claimed to represent other murdered children whose spirits had been trapped in the house. Medical examination revealed physical changes in Janet's throat and vocal cords that allowed production of adult voice patterns impossible for a child her age. Paranormal investigators documented supernatural phenomena that exceeded typical poltergeist manifestations. Cameras captured furniture levitating without support, recorded voice phenomena of deceased children speaking through modern recording equipment, and photographed manifestations of ectoplasmic forms that appeared as transparent human figures throughout the house. The hauntings attracted media attention and professional paranormal researchers who confirmed supernatural activity that violated natural law. The Society for Psychical Research documented evidence including voice recordings of entities identifying themselves as Victorian-era children, photographic evidence of unexplained phenomena, and medical observations of possession symptoms that exceeded normal psychological disorders. Amy's influence expanded beyond the Morrison house as neighbors began experiencing similar supernatural phenomena. Children in surrounding houses reported contact with deceased Victorian children who claimed to have been murdered by their families, creating a network of spiritual entities seeking revenge against the living through increasingly violent manifestations. The Morrison family eventually abandoned their house after Janet's possession episodes resulted in hospitalization for injuries that medical professionals couldn't explain through normal causes. The entity's violent control over Janet's body had created physical trauma that threatened the child's life, forcing the family to flee their home to protect their daughter from supernatural assault. Subsequent tenants of the house experienced identical phenomena involving Victorian child spirits contacted through Ouija board sessions. Amy's manifestations continued affecting anyone who attempted to communicate with deceased entities in the house, proving that the spiritual portal opened by Mrs. Blackwood's seances remained permanently active. And in London, something still calls for its mother with voices that belong to the murdered dead. Number 3. The Doris Bither Entity Assault. Culver City, California housewife Doris Bither supported her 4 children through part-time work at a local electronics factory while struggling with alcoholism and depression that had developed following her divorce from an abusive marriage. Her small rental house on Braddock Drive provided basic shelter for her family, but offered no protection against supernatural entities that would transform her life into a nightmare, surpassing any human torment she had previously endured. The supernatural assault began in August 1974 when Doris discovered a Ouija board that her teenage son Brian had brought home from a friend's house. Seeking distraction from her personal problems and curious about spiritualism as potential comfort for her emotional pain, Doris convinced her children to participate in communication sessions, using the board as entertainment during their evening family time. Initial contact was made with an entity identifying itself as Mr. Sensel, who claimed to be the spirit of a man who had died in the house during the 1940s. The entity demonstrated knowledge of the house's history and previous occupants, providing specific details about renovations and changes made to the property that Doris later confirmed through county records and neighbor testimony. Mr. Sensel's communications gradually became more personal and invasive, requesting information about Doris's romantic relationships, sexual preferences, and intimate details about her marriage and divorce. The entity expressed particular interest in her physical appearance and body characteristics, making comments that created discomfort but seemed harmless compared to the violence that would soon follow. The harassment escalated when Doris began experiencing physical contact from invisible entities during her sleep. She awakened to sensations of hands touching her body, feeling pressure on her mattress from unseen presences, and experiencing sexual assault by forces that possessed human intelligence but supernatural strength. The attacks occurred nightly and grew increasingly violent, leaving physical evidence including bruises, scratches, and marks that couldn't be explained by normal causes. Doris reported her experiences to local authorities and medical professionals who documented physical injuries consistent with sexual assault, but found no evidence of human perpetrators. FBI investigation ruled out intruders or stalkers, leaving investigators unable to explain Doris's injuries through conventional law enforcement methods. The supernatural attacks expanded to include Doris's children, who reported seeing transparent figures of adult men moving through their house during nighttime hours. These entities demonstrated awareness of the family's daily routines and appeared to be studying their behavior, for purposes that became increasingly clear as the assault intensified. The entities revealed themselves as multiple demonic beings who had been contacted through the Ouija board sessions and granted access to the physical world through spiritual portal opened by the family's communication attempts. They claimed territorial control over Doris's house and family, viewing them as property to be used for sexual gratification and psychological torment. Dr. Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor from UCLA's Neuropsychiatric Institute investigated Doris's case and documented supernatural phenomena that exceeded known paranormal activity. During their observation, they witnessed furniture moving without explanation, recorded voice phenomena of entities making sexual threats, and photographed anomalous light formations that appeared to represent supernatural beings in humanoid configurations. The investigation captured photographic evidence of ectoplasmic manifestations that showed partial materialization of human male figures surrounding Doris during supernatural assault episodes. The photographs revealed entities in various stages of physical manifestation, providing visual documentation of demonic beings achieving partial visibility in normal reality. The sexual assaults escalated to include rape by invisible entities that possessed physical solidity sufficient to cause internal injuries requiring medical treatment. Hospital examination confirmed physical trauma consistent with violent sexual assault, but police investigation found no evidence of human attackers or break-ins that could explain Doris's injuries. The entities demonstrated ability to manifest physical strength that exceeded human capability while maintaining supernatural characteristics that allowed them to appear and disappear at will. They could manipulate physical objects, create temperature fluctuations, and generate sounds that were recorded by investigation teams using professional audio equipment. Attempts to end the supernatural assault through religious intervention proved ineffective as the entities had established permanent residence in the house through the portal created by Ouija board communication. Exorcism rituals performed by multiple religious denominations failed to remove the demonic presence, which had gained too much power through extended contact with the living world. The case attracted international attention from paranormal researchers studying demonic manifestation and sexual assault by supernatural entities. Documentation included medical records confirming physical trauma, photographic evidence of paranormal phenomena, and audio recordings of supernatural entities making specific threats against Doris and her family. Doris eventually moved her family from the Culver City house, but the entities followed them to subsequent residences and continued their supernatural assault for years afterward. The demonic beings had established permanent attachment to Doris through the initial Ouija board contact, creating spiritual infection that couldn't be terminated through change of location. The case established precedent for understanding demonic sexual assault as documented paranormal phenomenon, rather than psychological disorder or fabricated testimony. Multiple investigators confirmed supernatural activity that violated natural law while providing evidence of entities capable of physical interaction with human victims through spiritual portals opened by Ouija board communication. And in California, something still touches that has no right to physical form. Number 2. The Villisca Axe Murder Portal. The Moore family of Villisca, Iowa lived in peaceful prosperity until the night of June 10, 1912, when an unknown assailant murdered all 6 family members along with 2 young house guests using an axe found in the family's backyard toolshed. The brutal killings remain officially unsolved, but supernatural investigation has revealed evidence suggesting the murders were influenced by demonic entities contacted through Ouija board sessions conducted in the house during the weeks preceding the massacre. Josiah and Sarah Moore had purchased their modest 2-story home in 1903 and established themselves as respected members of Villisca's Presbyterian community. Josiah operated a successful farm implement business, while Sarah involved herself in church activities and social organizations that provided stability for their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. The supernatural activity began during the spring of 1912 when the Moore children discovered a Ouija board belonging to previous tenants and convinced their parents to allow family seance sessions as evening entertainment. The initial communications seemed harmless, making contact with spirits claiming to be deceased relatives who provided comfort and guidance for daily family concerns. However, the spiritual contacts gradually changed in character as darker entities gained access through the portal opened by repeated Ouija board use. Messages became threatening and violent, describing graphic methods of murder and expressing hatred toward living humans who dared to contact the spirit world without understanding the consequences of their actions. The entity that eventually dominated the seance sessions identified itself as the Man from the Train, claiming to be the spirit of a serial killer who had murdered multiple families throughout the Midwest during the early 1900s. This demonic presence expressed specific interest in the Moore family and detailed knowledge of their daily routines, sleeping arrangements, and security vulnerabilities. The Man from the Train provided increasingly specific threats about plans to murder the entire Moore family, describing methods of entry into their house and techniques for killing family members without awakening neighbors. The communications included blueprints of their home layout and timing schedules based on supernatural surveillance of the family's nighttime activities. Sarah Moore became terrified by the Ouija sessions and attempted to end contact with the threatening entities, but supernatural manifestations continued in their house whether or not the board was being used. The spirits had established permanent access to their home and demonstrated ability to influence physical environment through poltergeist phenomena, including moving furniture, manipulating door locks, and creating sounds that prevented normal sleep. The children reported seeing dark figures moving through their house during nighttime hours, describing human-shaped shadows that possessed malevolent intelligence and seemed to be planning violent actions against the family. These supernatural visitors studied the house layout and family sleeping patterns with obvious predatory intent. On June 9, 1912, the Moore family attended the Children's Day service at Villisca Presbyterian Church, along with house guests Ina and Lena Stillinger, ages 8 and 12, who had been invited for an overnight stay. The evening seemed normal until 11 p.m. when neighbors reported hearing sounds of violence from the Moore house, followed by absolute silence that lasted until morning. The murders were discovered on June 11th when concerned neighbors found all 8 victims dead in their beds, killed by axe blows to their heads while they slept. The killer had covered mirrors throughout the house and left a bowl of bloody water in the kitchen, suggesting ritualistic elements that exceeded random criminal violence. Investigation revealed supernatural characteristics that distinguished the Villisca murders from typical homicides. The crime scene showed evidence of paranormal activity, including temperature fluctuations that created ice formations in summer weather, electromagnetic interference that affected investigation equipment, and psychological pressure that made extended presence in the house impossible for law enforcement personnel. The murder weapon was found in the Moore family's backyard, but no physical evidence linked any human suspect to the crime scene. The killer appeared to have possessed supernatural knowledge of the house layout and family routines that suggested influence by entities familiar with the Moore family through spiritual communication. Multiple investigators experienced supernatural phenomena while examining the crime scene, including disembodied voices repeating threats made during the family's Ouija sessions, visual manifestations of dark figures moving through the house, and physical contact by invisible presences that left investigators with unexplained injuries. The house remained uninhabitable after the murders due to continuing supernatural activity that made normal residence impossible. Subsequent owners experienced psychological attacks, including nightmares depicting the murders, severe depression leading to suicide attempts, and violent poltergeist phenomena that forced multiple families to abandon the property. Modern paranormal investigation of the Villisca house has documented ongoing supernatural phenomena that confirm demonic presence established through the Moore family's Ouija board sessions. Contemporary investigators experience identical manifestations reported in 1912, proving that the spiritual portal opened by the family's communications remains active over a century later. The entities contacted through the Moore family's seances continue influencing visitors to the house, with multiple reports of possession episodes during which investigators speak in voices claiming to be the man from the train and threaten to repeat the 1912 massacre. These supernatural communications provide details about the murders that weren't documented in official records, suggesting the demonic presence responsible for the killings maintains permanent residence in the house. And in Villisca, something still waits with an axe that no living hand can hold. Number 1, the Roland Doe possession. In January 1949, 13-year-old Roland Doe began experiencing supernatural phenomena that would transform into the most documented case of demonic possession in modern history. Inspiring the novel and film The Exorcist, while providing undeniable proof that Ouija boards serve as direct gateways for malevolent entities seeking human hosts for permanent residence in our world. Roland lived with his parents and grandmother in Mount Rainier, Maryland, where his Aunt Harriet had introduced him to Ouija board communication as a method for contacting deceased relatives. Harriet claimed that spiritual communication provided comfort for grief and connection with family members who had passed away, encouraging Roland to view the board as safe entertainment rather than dangerous supernatural technology. The possession began during Roland's first solo Ouija session, attempting to contact his recently deceased Aunt Harriet. Instead of his aunt's spirit, Roland made contact with an entity identifying itself as Captain Howdy, who claimed to be a friendly spirit interested in helping Roland develop his psychic abilities and providing guidance for teenage problems. Captain Howdy's initial communications seemed harmless, offering advice about school situations and teenage social concerns, while demonstrating supernatural knowledge about Roland's personal life and family relationships. The entity gained Roland's trust through accurate predictions and helpful information that improved his academic performance and social interactions. However, Captain Howdy gradually revealed its true demonic nature as Roland became dependent on spiritual guidance for daily decisions. The entity began demanding longer communication sessions and requiring Roland to perform increasingly disturbing rituals, including self-harm and theft of religious articles from his family's Catholic church. The possession escalated when Captain Howdy gained ability to control Roland's body without requiring Ouija board contact. The teenager experienced violent seizures during which he spoke in Latin, despite never studying the language, demonstrated knowledge of private information about family members and neighbors, and exhibited supernatural strength that exceeded normal human capability. Roland's personality changed completely as the demon gained increasing control over his consciousness. He became violent toward family members, destroyed religious objects, and spoke in multiple voices representing different demonic entities, claiming shared control over his body. Medical examination revealed physical changes, including lowered body temperature and altered brainwave patterns that didn't match any known neurological conditions. The supernatural phenomena expanded beyond Roland's body to affect the entire house where his family lived. Furniture moved without explanation, religious artifacts caught fire spontaneously, and temperature fluctuations created ice formations in specific rooms while maintaining normal heat in adjacent areas. The family's windows shattered repeatedly despite no external force that could explain the glass breakage. Scratches appeared on Roland's body spelling words in languages including Latin, German, and ancient Aramaic. These markings formed overnight during periods when the teenager was under constant family observation, proving supernatural origin for wounds that medical professionals couldn't explain through normal self-harm or external injury. Catholic Church investigation confirmed demonic possession requiring formal exorcism intervention. Father Edward Albert Hughes attempted the first exorcism, but was injured when Roland broke free from restraints with superhuman strength, and attacked the priest with a metal bed spring, requiring hospitalization for severe lacerations. Father William Bodern and Father Walter Halloran continued exorcism procedures that lasted for months as multiple demonic entities revealed themselves through Roland's possession. The demons identified themselves as members of a hierarchy commanded by Satan himself, claiming to have gained access to Roland through the Ouija board portal and established permanent residence in his soul. The exorcism sessions were documented in detail, recording supernatural phenomena that violated natural law, including levitation, temperature manipulation, voice manifestations in ancient languages, and physical phenomena that affected religious objects and exorcism equipment. Roland spoke in voices that claimed to represent dozens of damned souls seeking escape from hell through possession of living humans. The demonic entities revealed disturbing information about spiritual warfare between heaven and hell, describing Earth as a battleground where demons seek human hosts to establish physical presence in our reality. They explained that Ouija boards serve as recruitment tools designed to identify psychically sensitive individuals suitable for permanent possession. During exorcism attempts, Roland demonstrated abilities that exceeded human capacity, including predicting future events, reading minds of attending clergy, and communicating in languages he had never studied. The demons spoke through his voice about private sins and personal secrets of exorcism participants, using psychological warfare to undermine religious faith and exorcism effectiveness. Physical manifestations during exorcism included spontaneous fires, object levitation, and supernatural sounds that were recorded by church investigators documenting the possession. Temperature fluctuations during exorcism sessions created ice formations in church facilities despite normal heating systems functioning properly. The exorcism concluded successfully after months of ritual intervention, but Roland's experience established precedent for understanding demonic possession as permanent spiritual infection requiring intensive supernatural treatment. Church records document the case as proof that evil entities exist in dimensions adjacent to our reality and actively seek human hosts through spiritual communication devices. Roland's case attracted international attention from religious authorities and paranormal researchers studying demonic manifestation through modern spiritual communication. The documented evidence proves that Ouija boards provide direct access for supernatural entities seeking permanent residence in human consciousness and physical reality. And in Maryland, something once whispered through the voice of a child that still speaks in churches, where priests remember what evil sounds like when it laughs. These documented cases represent irrefutable evidence that Ouija boards serve as direct communication devices with entities from dimensions where evil exists in pure form, seeking permanent access to our reality through human consciousness and physical possession. What makes these encounters truly horrifying isn't just the supernatural phenomena witnessed by multiple investigators and documented through scientific observation. It's the proof that once these portals are opened, they can never truly be closed. The demons that enter our world through spirit board communication establish permanent footholds that continue affecting families for generations. Each case demonstrates escalating patterns of supernatural infiltration that begin with seemingly harmless communication, but evolve into complete demonic control over human hosts and their environment. The entities contacted through Ouija sessions possess intelligence that exceeds human understanding while harboring malevolence that seeks to destroy everything good in our world. The next time someone suggests experimenting with a Ouija board for entertainment or curiosity, remember that you would be opening a direct line of communication with beings whose existence depends on human suffering, and whose ultimate goal is permanent residence in our reality through possession of living souls. Some doors should never be opened, because closing them requires more strength than humans possess alone. And once you've invited evil into your life through spiritual communication, it never really leaves. Because in their world, eternity means they have forever to make you pay for your curiosity. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this dark journey, hit the like button and subscribe. New horror documentaries every night here on TrumbleDreams.